What has been your scariest hiking experience? I was hiking up a very steep foothill in Wastate when the dead log next to the trail started vibrating. I stopped like WTF, then the ground started to move. 7.0 earthquake incoming. The thing about earthquakes is you're just minding your own business and the one thing you take for granted, the solid ground beneath your feet starts moving. It's very surreal. I'm in the middle of the woods on a very steep trail. I don't know how big this earthquake is, the big one. I don't know how long it's going to last. I think it was maybe 30 seconds, but time went into slow motion. Right when it started getting really strong and branches and dead trees start coming down, it stopped, and I noped back down to my car. It was potentially pretty dangerous given where I was. I'm glad it stopped when it did. 14 hours ago I was probably 4 years old in the dead of winter at my super rural childhood home. My dog, a large German shepherd, wandered off and I trusted him enough to follow him. My mom didn't see me leave the yard. I think she was cooking or something. Either way, following the dog wasn't the best idea. Once we got well out of sight he stopped being in leader mode and went into protect mode. He just stuck with me and wouldn't take me out of the woods. I was too young to know to follow my footprints back or anything, and it was dangerously cold. I don't know how much time had passed, but my mom ended up calling emergency services. Cops and firefighters came out looking for me, and my dog almost mauled a cop that got too close to me. It wasn't scary at the time, but looking back, I could have easily died in those woods. I was on a multi-week trip hiking in northern New Mexico, with afternoon showers pretty much expected every day. It was about 75 to 80 degrees and sunny, but it very quickly turned to dark, rainy, and about 35 to 40 degrees. We were in a valley on the side of a flat top mountain, if that makes any sense. Our next campsite was over the top, and below this mountain. Pretty soon lightning started striking nearby, so we had to assume the lightning position. We sat on our packs and tossed our hiking poles away. We weren't allowed to continue until the lighting was about 1.5 miles away. Pretty soon it kept getting closer and closer until I literally saw lightning strike about 200 feet away multiple times. We spent an hour and a half like this, and as it turns out, the zippers on my rain gear weren't waterproof. Never in my life have I felt the same level of what the hell am I doing here. It was more of a bushwalk, but when I was a teenager I lived near a very long creek trail and empty bushland. Beautiful place, very hilly and mountainous area with rainbow lorikeets and a dam nearby. My friend and I headed to the creek after school because I wanted to show her a bat colony near the trail. I don't remember if I turned left when we had to turn right or if we turned right when we had to turn left, but either way we never found the colony. This was before smartphones, so we just followed the creek aimlessly for a couple of hours, hoping it would end up somewhere familiar. It was getting dark when she first saw it, a flash of red in the bushes. We have Rosellas out here, but she swore it wasn't a bird. We heard rustling now and then, which made us walk faster. It was hard to move fast on the terrain because the slope along the creek was getting steeper. Embedded in the creek bed were sometimes these huge concrete cylinders, big enough to stand inside in. Some of them had water flowing through them, some didn't. Soon after she saw the red flash, we spotted something else on the other side of the creek. It was one of the big concrete cylinders, but there was stuff inside. I thought it was garbage at first, but it was a home. We could make out blankets, a shopping trolley full of miscellaneous items, and newspaper/magazine cutouts hanging off the concrete walls. Mostly of girls. We didn't say anything to each other, but we were almost running at this point. We heard rustling now and then, which could have been anything. Plenty of wildlife in that area of bushland. It was maybe 30 minutes to an hour later when we saw wire fencing and followed it to some kind of garbage yard in an industrial area. Turned out we were a 3.5-hour walk from our original starting point. I'm still not 100% what happened that day, other than the fact my friend was grounded for about a month. Hiking and camping in the Grand Canyon several years ago. Flash flood in the middle of the night. Had to climb up onto a huge boulder on the side of the canyon and tremble in the cold for hours, while the campsite was completely swept away in the darkness. Had to be rescued by helicopter the next day. I was night hiking on the PCT coming out from hiker heaven and there was some people behind me, but a ways back. Anyways, I came around the corner and the trail then made a left. Anyways, I lifted my head and looked up and to the left to see a pair of eyes watching me. I yelled and the coyote ran off no problem. I kept hiking and then maybe 5 minutes later there is another pair of eyes. This coyote didn't run right away. I yelled and slapped my poles together and then it finally ran down the hill, but not very far. It stood there watching me. It was close enough that my headlamp was lighting up the body of the coyote, so I could see it somewhat. It was on the edge of my headlamp beam. I yelled and called out to it. It stood there watching me. Finally it turned and ran. However, it didn't run down the hill, it ran along the hillside parallel with the trail. So I continued to yell at it and it never got any farther away. The trail switchbacked, and that was the last I seen of that one. This was when I decided to wait for the people behind me to catch up. I still was ahead of them for the most part, but they were much closer. I seen another pair of eyes, I think, but they disappeared so quickly I'm not really sure if it really was a coyote or not. Anyways, I ended up waiting for the group behind me and camped with them. Ended up hiking with some of them farther down the trail. In the 6th grade our school took us to this sketchy campsite for the 3rd year a row. We all hated it there. There were wasps in the canteen, the tents provided had no flooring, a dinky ropes course 14 building, and we slept on army cots that were stiff and hard. Also the windows of the tents opened from the outside, so you can imagine the fun the boys had with that. This particular year was the final straw that made our school see just how awful this place was. We were hiking up the side of a hill on a real narrow path. We had to walk in single file because that was how narrow the path was. We were tired, sweating, and everyone just wanted to go home. Then some kid stepped on a beehive that was on the path and all hell broke loose, 30 kids screaming and running up and down the path. One kid tore his sweater off and threw it off the side of the hill because there were bees in it. Another girl was bitten on the lip and it swelled up to the size of a golf ball. Everyone was stung that day, and if you didn't get stung you were one of the kids who was at the front of the line and managed to escape the swarm, but ran into a bush of poison ivy. One girl fell down in the middle of the swarm as she tried to run away, and the bees went at her. She ended up temporarily paralyzed from the waist down, and a teacher had to go and carry her out of there. Once everyone escaped they couldn't go back because, well, bees. So they had to hike the rest of the path with their bee stings. Never again. Hiking in Alaska, Mount Ptarmigan, summer. I was 14 or so, and I was hiking with my family. We were vacationing in Alaska and our cousin was a hiking guide that day, since he's a real outdoorsman and marathon runner. We had already reached the summit, and we were on our way back down, when my cousin saw a snowy patch almost the size of a football field leading down the mountain. So this genius decides we should slide down the hill on our butts and use our heels to dig into the snow to slow ourselves down. Sounds easy enough, yeah? Well, I was barely 100 pounds, and the snow was topped with a layer of slick ice. So I turned into an out of control human bobsled with no brakes, with my only hope of stopping being the large boulders at the bottom of this mountain. Since I'm currently writing this, I didn't get obliterated at the bottom of a mountain, but my dad did have to run as fast as he could up a snowy slope and tackle me to finally get me to stop. He's the only reason I'm alive today. 10th dad of the year. I was doing an internship and staying in the basement of a friend. The house was located far from town, in a mostly wooded area. Behind the house, about 50 feet away, was a mile-long path through the woods. I would walk the path on nice days and enjoyed the serenity of it. One night at dinner time I mentioned to my hosts that I had seen what appeared to be a house in good condition about half a mile away. It was set back from the path on the opposite side, with no obvious access to any local roads. I didn't trespass. This was all that I could see from the path. So I asked about it. One said, "Oh, that's our neighbor. He's a hermit and hardly ever comes out. Nice guy, but best to leave him alone." No problem. A few days later I'm on the path, and as I near the section where the hermit lives, something catches my eye. Movement. So I turned my head and saw a man completely dressed in white pants, shirt, hat, slowly walking through what looked like a garden in his yard. He stopped and looked right at me, so I gave a friendly smile and short wave, and kept on going. On my return, he was nowhere to be seen. The next week I go out again. This time, as I get closer to the same section, I feel like I'm being watched. It was more intense than I'd ever had that feeling before, so I slowed and listened very carefully, trying to casually glance around, when I saw it. About 20 feet ahead of me, perched on top of a thin dead tree trunk, just below eye level, was a dirty and mutilated doll's head. It might not sound like much, but it was freaky. I looked at it, made an obvious nodding gesture, deliberately turned around, and went the other way, never going back that way for the rest of my time there. Took my 2 boys hiking in the southern Sierras. Oldest kid started kinda bonking, but we were headed back to our campsite. I was walking with the oldest, while my younger son was about 75 yards ahead. Suddenly I notice the boy ahead has stopped and making some sort of strange motion. As I get closer I can see he is mouthing the word bear. We get to him, and there is a creek running along the trail with a bear drinking out of it, about 15 yards from where we stood. For whatever reason, my first thought was to take a picture, but my camera was in my pack. I tried to quietly take it out, but the sound caught the bear's attention. It looked straight at me and then instantly, like a cat, took off and ran the opposite direction. For whatever reason I was too dumb to be scared when we first saw the bear, but when it ran away, the sheer speed at which it moved, and the fact that it was so big we could hear its feet hitting the ground caused me to realize, had it decided to attack us, we would have had no time to react. Of course it was a black bear, although it was one big black bear, so we were not in any real danger, which was part of my reason for being so calm at first. But man, I've seen bears before but never really appreciated their speed and agility until that moment. A couple years ago I was hiking and saw 3 full-grown bears just chilling eating some berries. A really unforgettable experience, but still one that caused my adrenaline to hit new levels. Me, my sister, and one of our cousins went hiking along one of the trails at the campground we were staying at one summer. We were all really young. My cousin is older than us, and she wasn't older than 13 to 14. We followed the paved trail for a while, but my cousin got bored and wanted to go off onto one of the dirt paths, and we walked further for like 20 minutes. We could see the confusion and panic on her face when she realized she didn't have any idea where we were, and the dirt path eventually just ended. We were lost for over an hour before we finally found the road that led to the campground and flagged a car down. It was a family who stopped to help, and they told us they would give us a ride back. But my cousin, I guess afraid to get us into any more trouble, said we couldn't accept rides from strangers. I was so relieved to see another person that I didn't care and wanted to get in the car so bad lol, but the woman understood and got out and walked with us all the way back to camp. So thankful for her to this day, though I'm sure we weren't in that much danger. I was so scared that we'd never make it out of those woods. Phantasma here, hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to sub for more.